Hi guys, so today's video is a look at how to stay inspired within 2021. As photographers, obviously depending on what genre you're in, you may be significantly affected by the COVID situation or you may not be. Myself, I'm an events and portrait photographer and my work has pretty much diminished since COVID hit. But this is trying to look at ways that I'm maintaining that positivity and drive so that when things do come back to normal, I'm hitting the ground running. So I'm hoping that I can outline a few things that you may be able to use, and I would love to hear your thoughts on these. Okay, so the first one is researching photographers and artists. This is something I've always done and I've loved doing, and I think it's really good to understand the photographers, the artists that have come before you. This is something that's been incredibly important to me and something I just enjoy doing. I love looking at photographs, love looking at how people look at the world differently, from portrait photographers to landscape photographers, fashion, anything. And obviously it depends what genre you're in. I photograph people, so for me, I love the portrait photographers and the great portrait photographers and fashion photographers, and I look at their work to try and see what is relevant to me. So one thing that I've had a bit of a habit with over this pandemic is buying books. I think I kind of see it as a way of rewarding myself or trying to, keep myself positive. So I've been purchasing lots of books of photographers that have caught my eye. Now, I think rather than looking online, I think buying books, as long as you can afford to, is a great way of getting a really good perspective into a photographer's work that you may admire. Obviously, if you look online, you might see a selection of photographs which are sometimes, the very best bits or a curated look at their work. Whereas obviously in a book, you get to see a project or, a series of images that more often than not that they have curated. I think it's a really good insight into how they piece together photographs. And if it's a project in particular, the storytelling element, I very much see myself as a storyteller, obviously photographing weddings and also trying to get into editorial photography. I think the storytelling element is really important. So I find books incredibly interesting and I can look at them time and time again. So just to give you a quick indication, this is a book that I have really connected with recently. It's The Americans by Robert Frank. This is a huge book for me. It's really touched a few chords. I just love the way it's photographed. The strength of the work, which is shown throughout the project, is just absolutely fascinating. He has such a range within his skill. There's many iconic images within this, and I've just really loved it. This is obviously the photograph from the front of the book. It's one of his most well-known images, but there's just such a selection. So that's a beautiful book. So from that book, what I then find interesting to do is then go back and find, the influences of how Robert Frank actually became inspired to do the book. So this is a book by Walker Evans, and Robert Frank was influenced by this book. So this is a book that photographed America throughout the late 20s and 30s. And Robert Frank's book, The Americans, came around about 20 years later. And Frank is noted to have had influences from this book. So I find that really interesting. So I've gone back and had a look at that. And I've also got a book which is talking about how Walker Evans worked. So this includes test prints, so you can see multiple slides, how he began to create images. It gives you a really good insight into how he worked as well. So I find that fascinating. As well as that, I've also got some books from Robert Frank. He photographed in France and also in London. So Yeah, I mean, obviously, for me, I just love to see how artists work, how they think. So interestingly, these two books from London and France, they came before, sort of, I think 5 or 6 years before The Americans was created. So you see the sort of progression and the development and how his style was sort of being honed throughout the years until obviously he came to The Americans, which is one of his best known books. So I think for, whatever your influences may be, I would definitely suggest buying photo books and really looking at them time and time again. When I saw The Americans for the first time by Robert Frank, I looked through and I was, obviously impressed, but it's actually since looking through it time and time again, I've really become to understand the depth and the quality to the work. Okay, so the next point that we're going to go on to is very similarly to this. It's actually listening to interviews, listening to behind the scenes, watching documentaries of those photographers that you know and enjoy. So on YouTube or on Netflix, there are so many documentaries that are available. And I find that looking into a photographer, obviously you can see their work through books, but actually listening to them talk and giving inspiration and talking about the way they work, I find really fascinating. So that's another way that you can become inspired by, some of your favorite artists and photographers. So going on from this, I think another great way to stay inspired is to do personal projects. So myself, for example, obviously where I photograph events, at the moment we're in lockdown, so I'm not able to photograph those kind of things. So what I'm looking to do is to do personal projects, things that I come up with, ideas that I come up with, basically as an excuse to just keep myself taking photographs. It's something I've always moaned that I don't have the time to do. In the wedding season, I'm very, very busy. So I struggle to find the time to do it. So I found this quiet time as an ideal opportunity to get out with my camera and to photograph the things that I really care about. So come up with some ideas. I don't think you don't have to have an obvious idea of what you want to photograph. Sometimes it could be that you start photographing one thing and you end up photographing something quite different. For me, I think sometimes I overthink it. So at the moment I have 3 personal projects that I have going on, and I've found that nice because you don't have too much pressure on each one. You can sort of mix between the 3 as and when you feel like it. But it's great because it keeps me going out. Last week, for example, I went out 5 days out of the week, just out enjoying myself, capturing things and not putting too much pressure. So I think that's a really cool way to stay inspired. Okay, so I think the next point that leads nicely on from this is just to keep practicing. I was brought up as a sportsman, and for me, I've always known that to be good at something you have to practice, whether that's a musician or a sportsman. If you want to be very good at something, you have to put the time in to improve your skills, to widen your knowledge. So I heard a great interview with a photographer on YouTube called John Free. He has a great website on putting techniques and ideas forward, so I would definitely recommend that. But he talks about how photographers just expect to go out only at paid jobs, and that they're going to go out and they're going to be brilliant, whereas every other person who is a skills person actually practices their craft, and I couldn't agree more with that. So whether you're going out and working or whether or not you're doing your personal projects, I would just encourage you to get out and experiment and try new things, whether it's using different cameras, using different techniques, or just photographing something that's completely out of your comfort zone. I would just implore you to do so. So point number 5 is improving your existing portfolio. Now, going on from what we've talked about before, where you've been looking for inspiration, I think sometimes it's great to use some of this inspiration and to improve your own work. As I talked about, I've taken certain things from the photographers that I look up to. So perhaps you might want to bring this into improving some of your portfolio, whichever way that may be. But what I love to do is to try and improve upon my existing portfolio. Whether or not you're up and coming or you're well-established photographer, I always think that you can improve upon what you have. So I think developing ideas and concepts that you can push forward to create those shoots is a really exciting way to have something to look forward to and to stay healthy in looking forward to working in the future. So for example, what I've been doing is putting together concepts for wedding shoots to try and improve upon my portfolio in a way that my portfolio looks fresh, so that when clients are looking at it, they see new ideas. It also keeps me pushing myself and keeps me on my toes. But also, obviously, I've been doing my personal projects, which are keeping my editorial and portrait work fresh. So yeah, so I think really just keep sort of planning things, have something to look forward to, share your ideas with friends, with other people, and try and hone those concepts to make them as strong as possible. For me, what I find as a really good way of doing this is actually creating Pinterest boards. Sometimes, if you have ideas and they get lost, you end up getting frustrated that you can't remember them. But for me, what I do is I create boards that have concepts, that have photographs, that sort of give me a visual representation. And obviously I can then send them to people that I want to work with and ask for their ideas. But I think it's a nice way of getting those ideas out of your head and onto paper, as it were. So you have something you can remember and something you can actually build and develop. So point number 6, the final one, is building collaborations with people. So this goes on from our last point, in that obviously we have concepts that we're working towards, and then it's actually putting together the shoot and doing everything you can to get to the point where the shoot is going to take place. I think one thing for me, where I'm starting out early on in the portrait and editorial side of things, is actually what I'm doing is trying to build collaborations and relationships with people to build a team. So I can have people that I trust, so that when I do have a shoot, I know who I can call upon. Rather than having to worry about that closer to the time, I'm using this quieter period to try and build those relationships and talking with people, trading off ideas, so that we have something that we can work towards. So one way that I've found has been really beneficial is a new app called Clubhouse. I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but if you haven't, you soon will. Clubhouse is a great way to meet other people within your industry. It's an online social media app where there are rooms that are created, and everyone can discuss pretty much whatever you want. But through this app, I've met some incredible people already, even though it's only early stages for me. But I'll definitely be using this to try and connect with people in my area, and also to share knowledge and learn from others. It's really, really great. If you are on Clubhouse, I'm there under @DavidWheeler. So I hope that's been useful. I hope I haven't rambled too much, but they're the things that I'm doing constantly to try and keep myself pushing. I would love to hear any ideas that you have and how you've been trying to stay productive throughout this time. I'm really looking forward to getting back out shooting soon, and events, who knows when they're going to happen, but they will have to happen at some point. I've got a lot of little things coming up in the pipeline this year. I'm looking to share a lot more work that I have under development. A few things I'm holding off until I've sort of got the ideas fully together, but I will share a few little snippets just to give you an idea. Please let me know what you've been up to, anything you would like me to do videos on in the future. And if you've liked this video, please press subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.